I like to talk to my executive team about to do anything around modernisation, improvement, uplift, you need to have good foundations. And for me, that's a really important element of as well.
Tracey Evans, it's so good to be here with you. You're currently the new CIO at Vertus Health, previously of Seek, and from some of the information that's been coming out of the keynotes and the roundtables this morning, there seems to be an aggressive need for organizations to modernize their technology and simplify. When setting the strategy for modernization, what are some of the things that we should consider of what good looks like?
What good looks like? So from the point of view of what good looks like, I think good looks like at least having a starting point from the point of view of an architecture view of the world. So certainly at Seek, when we started our journey of modernisation and consolidation, it was all about let's be really clear on architecture. I think that pillar is really important because it enables you to visualise and understand what you've got sitting in your stack, what's duplicated, what's superfluous, what are the things that we could build on, enhance, develop differently. So for me, that architecture piece is, I think, absolutely critical as one of the real key pillars when you're starting to think about modernisation. With my role at Vertus, just stepping into that now and starting to think about how do we modernise, how do we think about our digital footprint going forward. Also starting to look at your capability map. Well, that's what I've called it. So, what are the foundational elements that you need in place? What does good infrastructure look like? What's the security posture? So again, getting a really good understanding of the foundations. I like to talk to my executive team about to do anything around modernisation, improvement, uplift, you need to have good foundations. And for me, that's a really important element of as well. So capability, foundations, I think understanding your team that you've got in place, capability that they have, do they have the right skills for you to actually think about modernisation? Do you have gaps in that particular capability map? Do you need to think about how you set up your team, what you need to do with your partners, how that whole ecosystem needs to look like? So I think that's really important. And then probably the other element for me is the vendor roadmap and getting clarity around what is in your stack. What's duplicated? What are the things that you could consolidate, look at differently? What are some of the actual other software platforms that you should be considering as part of evolving and modernising? So I think there's a couple of elements to it.
And you mentioned the application consolidation. Obviously, there's sunken investment in legacy. There's duplication of resources. And when in a complex environment, having visibility of how to link IT initiatives to value in the organization is probably quite a tricky task. So in the reduction of applications, how do you identify things that will lead to value in your organization?
Again, I'm just thinking back to my time at Seek. So, when I first stepped into the Seek environment, to your question, we were using a enterprise piece of software for our CRM. We had heavily customised it, like a lot of organisations.
Yes.
Had a really awesome internal team that knew it inside out. But we had got to the point where we weren't only thinking about modernisation of our platforms, but we were also thinking about our larger business model and how we wanted to consolidate a couple of different businesses across the APAC region. So as part of that journey, I needed to work with my exec team around evaluating whether that enterprise software that we had in our landscape at that point of time was fit for purpose and was going to be able to scale the way that we needed it to. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of those platforms, we hadn't, I like to call water and fed it the right way. So it had also sat in the corner and it hadn't had a lot of love and attention. Reputationally, it wasn't great. So, to your question, it was having a pretty serious conversation with my exec team around, okay, from a business goal perspective, this is where we want to get to. This is what the platform's given us. We know it's only going to take us this far. We've got to make a decision. We either spend money and we actually evolve and enhance it and we move forward, or we look at something different that we think is going to scale. So then we went through a large process of doing a market scan, going through the general process of, RFP, getting the business involved. So I think that's really critical, having the right people involved in that decision making. That wasn't a quick process. That was 3 to 6 months worth of work. And we came out the other end with a pretty clear view of where we wanted to get to and what we wanted to actually move to from an application perspective to enable us to get there. But there was a lot of due diligence around that and a lot of connection into the business to make sure that we were really clear on our roadmap where we wanted to get to, and we had the right software provider working with us to get there.
That's really interesting. And I love the CRM and the analogy that you gave around it, because sometimes with these CRM or ERP or big clunky back-end systems, when they're customized, they can be like Jenga towers, right?
Very much so.
You take a piece out, it leaves a gap. You build something else on top, that whole thing's going to shake, right?
Absolutely.
And it sounded like could have possibly fallen over. And one of the things that comes into that as well is the security and risk component. That, in this environment where you have software that could be, I don't know how old it was, but maybe in some cases 15 plus years old, those things are out of patch and out of date. So how important was being secure and trusted and emphasizing the risk component of it?
So I think it's a really interesting question for me to answer from a Seek perspective. When I stepped into Seek as an organisation, we were 400 people. By the time I left, we were 3,000. So when I first walked in, your question around security and risk, it wasn't our main driver. Our main driver was customer first and making sure that they had the best experience. As you start to get bigger and your sphere of influence and the amount of data I think that you have in your system, that starts to evolve and change, and that certainly did for us. So as part of the decision to actually look at what was the right solution for us to move into the next phase of growth as an organisation, it was certainly one of the key factors that we considered, that we probably wouldn't have done so if we had made the decision probably 3 years earlier. So it was really interesting to watch the organisation evolve as part of that as well. But risk and security became a lot more important, especially because we knew this solution wasn't just going to be an Australian solution, but an APAC solution as well.
And sometimes that can be a problem to sell to the organisation too. When I started with Adapt, we were a small organisation. I head up our data. So for me to try a new data initiative, I could go have fun all the time, right? But now as an 80-person organisation, there's governance, there's cloud rules. I'm guessing doing things like selling this to engineers is quite a difficult journey, right?
Well, I think I loved the engineers at Seek, so they were awesome,
course,
amazing,
I'm sure we do.
People.
Yeah.
However, again, we had got to a point, and this was a really interesting discussion that we had when we were evaluating software solutions, so we were evaluating SaaS products, right? We had an awesome engineering team that could tell me, I can build that for you. I don't want you to build that for me because that's not where I want you to focus your time. It makes it difficult for us to scale and do what we need to do with it. And you need to focus on some of the other areas which are really important from a customer experience for us. If we can get proprietary software to do some of these things, we shouldn't be focusing on that from the point of view of our internal resources. Was a really hard discussion to have because for them, the Seek website was their baby and they built it. So they look at some of this proprietary stuff, but we can do it so much better. And you're like, I know, but I don't want you to because I want you to focus on that. And we're going to use this because it's going to give us the best outcome from a scale perspective. So it was a really, it was an interesting conversation that I would have many times in the hallway about people telling me how much better they could build the software if I would just let them.
I suppose that scales across not just in the IT team, because you were talking about you went out to the business and you assessed business needs. Yeah. Now, the needs of a marketing department versus an operation department. Yeah. So there must have been some sort of balanced communication compromise there.
Well, again, it was also part of the Seek maturity journey. So again, when I first walked into the organisation, our proprietary software had been built in a manner that whoever you were in the organisation, you had a different requirement. Therefore, I'm going to configure and build it for you, which again doesn't make it scalable or easy to manage. So one of the principles, the design principles we had going into looking at the future was that we wanted to align to standardisation from a process perspective. So to your point, I needed a strong steering committee that were very engaged in that project, because there was a lot of discussion around, okay, sales team B do it different to sales team A. Are you willing to compromise and let's get to a point where we have some standardisation so that we can roll this out consistently? Or do you want to go down to another path, which is going to add these layers? Again, our steering committee really evolved and grew as we moved through that project. So we implemented that during COVID. So we did it all virtually, which was really interesting. But they adhered to those design principles, and we came out the other end with a very, very good product that people had compromised and were willing to accept that they needed to change behaviour and the way that they operated to enable us to roll out something that we could scale more broadly and quickly. So that took a lot of communication, a lot of change management, and a lot of commitment from the project team to make sure that we drove the change consistently.
And you mentioned that you used a trusted software vendor.
Yeah.
And this is something that I hear from a lot of CIOs. We chose a vendor that we trust.
Yeah.
If it's a new vendor,
Yeah.
how do you establish that trust early on?
So there were two elements to our implementation. So the vendor was really important. And for us, the way that we established trust was we did a couple of proof of concepts with them around very specific use cases that we wanted to ensure the actual solution was going to be able to support for us, because they were actually critical processes. The other piece was, and I think it's really interesting with vendors, how actively they listened to how we talked to them about our culture, the way that we operated, what was important to us, the way they showed up to presentations, the way they showed up to discussions, seek a highly casual environment, right? So if I had people turning up in business suits, not a great look. But a really important thing for us, right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to adapt to our environment to show that you want to be partner? So all of those things played out from the software vendor perspective, but then we also had to go get an implementation partner, and again went through a similar exercise with regards to doing a little bit of speed dating as to, how we make sure that we can work together, and you're going to be really comfortable in a culture that is not highly corporatized, highly agile and very innovative in the way that they operate, and you're able to actually adapt and actually become part of that, because, it's important you feel like you're part of our organisation, not an extension. So they were really important elements for us.
That's brilliant, because when some people look at these large core system upgrades, they see it as taking a huge risk into the potential unknown, right?
Yeah.
But if you've had a small couple of proof of concept use cases, they start to know your organization,
Absolutely.
you know theirs, and you build the relationship
Absolutely.
from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really important.
Cool. Well, look, moving into your new role, I think one of the things I'd like to know, as a CIO that's changed industry, how different is it being a CIO in a platform business to, say, a healthcare business? I know it's early days.
Yeah.
Is it pretty much the same role, or is it a little bit different?
So my role at Virtus is a little bit broader. So it's owning all of the tech domain. So at Seek, we'd evolved to there was a chief data officer, there was a CISO, there was a chief technology. So there was a range of us. So we all had our core elements that sort of delivered into the broader tech strategy. Whereas at Virtus Health, I own the whole lot. So it was one of the things that attracted me to that particular role was actually having the ability to influence across a whole tech platform in an industry that I think there is so much going on in healthcare with regards to digitalisation, artificial intelligence, data. It's an exciting space. It's an interesting space from the point of view of stakeholders. So I have clinicians, I have scientists, and I have doctors that all have different passions around technology, different gaps around technology as well. So there's a lot of education there. And, I think for me, the other piece, which has been really, really nice, is, starting to build relationships with my exec team and learning about their sort of gaps with regards to digital literacy and technology and how it all fits together. So I think for me, the biggest change has been coming out of an organisation that, ate, slept and worked tech to an organisation that tech's really important, but I don't think we probably fully understand yet what are the benefits that we can get out of it and what's the strategy we want to drive to and how as an exec team we're going to work together to do that. So, for me, that's a really exciting challenge as well.
Yeah, and in a practitioner organisation where you look at, say, an engineering company, physical engineering, or a mining company or a hospital, where you have this mix of practitioners and the admin stuff, getting people to speak a common language can be quite difficult sometimes as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm still learning, even from the point of view. So Virtus Health is an IVF business, so I'm on a massive learning curve at the moment with regards to understanding how and what that all means. But also, to your point, helping people understand. One of the things that I'm working with the business on at the moment is prioritisation. So, we don't have any real method of engagement with our relevant teams around ensuring we're working on the right things, that it lines up to business strategy and that we're being thoughtful. So I'm starting to work with my stakeholders across the business to help them understand why it's important that we prioritise, that we line things up to the business strategy, that we understand and we're clear what we should be working on, that we have the right representation from a business perspective involved in some of those large initiatives. And that's starting to help build some of that knowledge, but I've still got a way to go. But I've got people that are really excited and passionate and want to do really, really cool stuff. So there's lots of opportunity, but there's a bit of work to do.
Yeah, in healthcare, I see across a wide range of organizations, the concept of digital champions is important because, say, someone that's a clinician, their technology savviness needs to be in the context of them being able to perform in their role, right? So do you see champions of digital playing a role, say, if you want to uplift systems or change the digital experience?
Absolutely. So I'm a massive supporter of I don't like technology just being behind a door and stuff comes out and people just absorb it. I don't think that works in today's world. I think technology is so prolific across your organisations that you need to have the right level of representation. I don't have it yet, but one of the things that I am kicking off is that concept of how we identify the champions across the business. And it's also important in healthcare because I'm not a scientist or a clinical person, so I don't understand the deep technical requirements that they have. So I think it's really important to have the right people engaged as we build out our strategy and our roadmap so that we are meeting their requirements. So for me, that extended group's really important and something that I've just started to evolve and grow across the organisation. I've got really good people that are excited to be part of it and they're just wanting to know how we're going to do it. So, for me, it's a really good opportunity.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Last question. Yeah. I ask this of everyone, so you don't need to answer it if you don't want to.
A bit scared.
You're a bit scared. How does your role look different in 10 years' time?
Oh, wow. I think whether it's a CIO role, a CTO role, I was just having this conversation before with someone with regards to, data and tech and digital are so connected that, how do you make sure that connection stays together, right? So I think that's going to be interesting because in some organisations you've seen that pulled apart already, in others it's still centralised. But I also think from the point of view of, chief information officers, my role is not to be just deep in the tech anymore. My role is to be the cheerleader and to actually work extensively across the business to make sure that we have an educated workforce, that we're thinking about technology the right way. I'm enabling our business strategy. I'm enabling my key stakeholders to deliver their value that they need. I'm making tech easy as possible, and I'm keeping us secure.